Hello viewers! Is your car running rough on idle, with its engine shaking and struggling to keep constant revs? Not only is this annoying, but it's also a definitive sign something's not right. Even if the situation seems to be much better while driving and pressing the throttle, you shouldn't ignore this issue, as it's often one of the first signs of something likely to become even worse over time. Now, while there is no straightforward answer to what might cause a rough idle, it can be a lot of things, we're going to check the most common reasons for such behavior. Let's go! For a start, we have the throttle body, which controls how much air goes into the intake. This in essence is a flap that opens and closes depending on how much we squeeze the throttle pedal. However, as times and miles go by, the dust in the incoming air and oil vapors coming through the PCV system might form deposits inside the throttle body's housing, effectively reducing airflow. And this is most notable while idling, because the throttle plate is almost closed at that point, and any deposits will start to choke the engine. Luckily, in most cases, the issue can be solved by thoroughly cleaning and, if needed, recalibrating the throttle body. Similar to the throttle body is the idle air control valve, which is what many slightly older cars with cable-operated throttle use to bypass around the throttle plate when it's completely shut. Again, what happens is that dirt and oil fumes gather inside it and form carbon buildups, which then don't let enough air through, resulting in rough engine. The next thing that can cause the engine to run unevenly are injectors, whose task is to turn fuel, which is liquid, into a finely dispersed mist that burns easier. And if for any reasons, dirt buildups, mechanical damage, one of the injectors doesn't do this as efficiently as others, then the combustion in that cylinder will be significantly worse, with rough engine operation being the result. This is usually most notable on idle, as that's when these differences have the greatest impact. One of the practical ways to get some insight into what's happening in the engine is to check the fuel correction data by cylinders using a diagnostic device. This, in essence, tells us how much each of the injectors gives more or less fuel than some nominal value, all in attempt to achieve smooth operation. If the values for one of the cylinders differs a lot from others, something's not right, with the bad fuel injector being one of the most common causes. Newer engines with direct fuel injection and diesel-powered vehicles are especially prone to these issues. Next, let's once again turn our attention to a thing specific to cars with gasoline engines: spark plugs. Their purpose is to, quite literally, ignite the compressed mixture of air and fuel. Over time, they could get covered by a layer of dirt, caused by too much fuel, high oil consumption, or any other engine-related problem, or they simply wear out, and then they won't be able to generate a strong enough spark, causing the engine to run rough. Because of this, spark plugs must be replaced within certain intervals, which you can find all about in your car's service manual. Also, I'd like to point out that many newer cars are quite picky about the spark plugs themselves. They will work fine with OEMs or some aftermarket brands, while it will be noticeably worse with some other versions. Besides the spark plugs themselves, the engine might run rough because of the ignition coils, or, if the car has them, the spark plug cables. What happens is that their insulation cracks because of the age or exposure to oil or other leaks, preventing them from successfully generating and transferring the spark to the plugs. In addition to rough idle, you might experience a misfire, which will cause the engine to judder and hesitate, triggering a flashing check engine light on the dashboard. The air filter is critical for the engine's operation, as it keeps dust, dirt and other contaminants from getting into it. But this also means the paper element it's made from will become clogged with time, which consequently restricts the airflow. However, just like with spark plugs, the air filter should be checked and replaced on regular basis, as this helps the engine run smoothly. And while doing so, you want to choose a high-quality air filter that isn't easily clogged. For a few extra bucks, you'll get better protection for your engine. Now, one more air-related thing that's worth mentioning here. The whole intake, from the air filter to the engine itself, must be fully sealed. Otherwise, if some hoses or the intake manifold itself is cracked, or the gaskets between all these components are missing or have fallen apart, we'll have a so-called intake leak. This is the air that entered through these cracks instead of going through the filter and MAF sensor, meaning the car's ECU has no idea about its presence and won't inject enough fuel. As a result, we'll have a lean running condition which offsets the engine's operation and causes it to run rough and sluggish. If severe enough, these intake leaks will trigger a check engine light, meaning it's time to hook up the scan tool and check stored error codes. In most cases, when the engine is running lean, you'll see some of these. Next, I'd like to mention the EGR system, which returns the part of exhaust gases back to the engine, where they get burnt once again. This is done to reduce the emission of nitrogen oxides. The flow of these exhaust gases, how much and when they will go to the engine, is controlled by the EGR valve. The problem arises when the soot, which the exhaust gases are full of, forms buildups inside this valve, so it can no longer be completely closed. What happens then is that too much exhaust gases are going into the intake when the engine is idling, causing it to run rough or even shut down. Everything I said about the EGR valve also applies to the engine PCV valve, which vents oily fumes from the crankcase into the intake manifold. And in most cars, as a part of that vent, we have some kind of a valve with a separator and a membrane whose task is to separate as many oil droplets as possible from the stream that goes to the engine, but also to control their flow. But if any of these components break or get clogged, then a lot of oil fumes will go into the intake without any control, which then again leads to rough operation, especially at idle. Then one of the car's many sensors might not work properly, which must affect the engine's operations. True, modern cars have many sensors that can cause issues, but I would highlight two of them. On one hand, we have the MAF sensor, which tells the engine's computer how much air is going into the intake. If this is not correct, then the computer will not give an adequate amount of fuel, which, among other things, can lead to rough idling. On the other side, we have the oxygen sensor monitoring the composition of exhaust gases, which is then used to adjust fuel injection for optimal efficiency. This, of course, will not be achieved if the oxygen sensor is not working, which again can offset the engine's operation. Lastly, there is always a chance that one of the cylinders has much lower compression than others, which might cause the engine to run roughly or even misfire on idle. This usually happens as a result of mechanical damage or wear, especially on high mileage cars or those that were heavily abused or neglected in the past. To verify if this is the cause of your issues, you'll have to perform a compression test. If this shows one or more cylinders have low compression, the engine will have to be overhauled. And as you may imagine, this is not going to be cheap. Luckily, this doesn't happen very often, especially on newer cars. With all that said, only one question remains: how to tell which of these things might be causing rough idle? Well, there are several things you can try. First, hook up an OBD2 scanner, check for stored error codes, and if there are any, use them to narrow down the problem. Also, you can take a look at live data coming from different sensors to see if any of them seems to be way off. If that doesn't help, pop the hood and try to see if anything is loose, disconnected or cracked. Do this with the engine running. You might be lucky and hear the air hissing through some small crack in the intake. Also, while you're at it, try to remember when was the last time the air filter and spark plugs were changed. Who knows, maybe all the car needs is some regular maintenance. So there you have it. These are some of the most common causes for the engine to run rough on idle or low revs. I hope this video was helpful, and if so, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up for it and share it with your friends. But if not, and your car is still not running smoothly, then something else might be causing the issue. To continue troubleshooting, check out other videos here or visit our site mechanicbase.com for more detailed automotive repair guides. Bye!